She mounted the scaffold on November 3, 1793, calm and serene, fulfilling her own prophecy. Woman has the right to mount the scaffold. She must equally have the right to mount the rostrum. At 45, Olympe de Gouges became the only woman executed specifically for her political writings during the French Revolution's reign of terror. Marie Gouges was born May 7, 1748, in Montauban, a Huguenot city in southwestern France, where Occitan was spoken more commonly than French. Her baptism certificate lists Pierre Gouges, a butcher, as her father. But Pierre didn't attend the baptism, unusual for a legitimate father, and he died when Marie was only 2. The mystery of her paternity would haunt and drive her entire life. The evidence suggests her biological father was Jean-Jacques Lefranc, Marquis de Pompignan, an aristocratic poet-playwright who served as president of the Court of the Aids of Languedoc. Anne-Olympe Mouisset, Marie's mother, had been tutored as a girl and grew close to Pompignan during childhood. When romantic attachment developed, he was sent to Paris in 1734 to avoid scandal. Anne married the butcher Pierre Gouges in 1737, but Pompignan returned to Montauban in 1747, 1 year before Marie's birth. Contemporary politician Jean-Baptiste Poncet-Delpech later stated that all of Montauban knew Pompignan was the father. Whether real or imagined, this split identity, belonging to both bourgeoisie and aristocracy, yet fully to neither, created someone who couldn't accept the constraints placed on her. Her passionate advocacy for illegitimate children's rights throughout her career stemmed from this foundational wound. She attended the Ursuline School at Montauban, founded to prepare girls to become good Catholic housewives through basic reading, writing, and religious education. This limited formal education would later be weaponized against her. Critics accused her of being illiterate, a myth that persists today. The truth is more nuanced. She was literate but spoke Occitan as her first language. French was more difficult for her, marked by what Parisians perceived as a thick southern accent. She maintained secretaries throughout her career, often composing orally, as she struggled only to use a pen and ink, a common practice then, but one her enemies used to question her authorship. On October 24, 1765, 17-year-old Marie was married against her will to Louis-Yves Aubry, a caterer approximately 30 years her senior. She later wrote, "I was married to a man I did not love and who was neither rich nor well-born. I was sacrificed for no reason that could make up for the repugnance I felt for this man." 10 months into marriage, she gave birth to their son Pierre. 3 months later, Louis died in a destructive flood of the River Tarn. Marie was widowed at 18. The psychological impact was immediate and permanent. She never married again, calling marriage the tomb of trust and love. She refused to use her married name or be called Widow Aubry. Instead, she created a new identity, Olympe de Gouges, combining her family surname with her mother's middle name. The unhappy marriage solidified her understanding of women's oppression as institutionalized. She wrote multiple plays addressing forced marriage and compared it to forced religious vows, using metaphors of sacrifice and chains to show women's inability to choose their futures. Around 1767, Marie met Jacques Beatrix de Rosière, a wealthy businessman from Lyon. In 1768, he funded her move to Paris with her 2-year-old son. They lived together and he provided her with a comfortable income until 1788. Yet despite his desire to marry her, she refused. This arrangement gave her what she needed most: autonomy. She spent the next decade informing herself on intellectual and political matters and integrating into Parisian society. Noted for her Mediterranean beauty, her lively wit, and her passion for theatre, she was called one of Paris's prettiest women. Her spirit and beauty quickly opened the doors of salons, particularly those of Madame de Montesson and Comtesse de Beauharnais. She met writers like Louis-Sébastien Mercier, who helped her navigate the politics of the Comédie Française, and future revolutionary politicians Jacques-Pierre Brissot and the Marquis de Condorcet. Whether through reading or social osmosis, Olympe absorbed the major ideas of the Enlightenment, especially those of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, whom she called her spiritual father. By 1784, she was reputed to be the author of 2 novellas and about 30 plays. Her first published works appeared in 1788, both the novel Mémoires de Madame de Valmont and her anti-slavery play Zamoret et Mirza. Olympe de Gouges was fundamentally driven by contradiction. She was described as abrasive and aggressive, yet able to balance her passion with reason. During conflicts with the Comédie Française over her anti-slavery play, she exhibited explosions of bitter complaints at meetings where actors dismissed her work, yet followed these with polite and pacifying reconciliation gestures. She was simultaneously capable of calling Robespierre an insect and the egotistical abomination of the revolution, yet also of strategic diplomacy when circumstances demanded it. In 1784, Olympe wrote Zamoret et Mirza, the first French play to focus on the inhumanity of slavery, featuring enslaved individuals as complex characters rather than objects. She submitted it anonymously to the Comédie Française in 1785, and it was accepted. But once her gender was revealed, it was shelved for 4 years. After threatening legal action, it finally premiered in December 1789 as L'Esclavage des Noirs, but this time colonial merchants organized protests. The play closed after only 3 performances. In 1788, she published Réflexions sur les hommes nègres, establishing her as one of France's earliest public opponents of slavery. She wrote, "I clearly realized that it was force and prejudice that had condemned them to that horrible slavery in which nature plays no role, and for which the unjust and powerful interests of whites are alone responsible." She wrote approximately 40 plays total, 12 survive. Le Couvent ou Les Vœux Forcés in 1790 became her greatest theatrical success with approximately 80 performances, highlighting the injustice of forcing women into convents against their will. On September 14th to the 15th, 1791, Olympe published her most famous work, Déclaration des droits de la femme et de la citoyenne. The timing was deliberate. The Declaration of the Rights of Man had just become the preamble to France's new constitution, yet women were explicitly excluded from citizenship rights. The document opens, "Man, are you capable of being fair?" A woman is asking, "At least you will allow her that right. Tell me, what gave you the sovereign right to oppress my sex?" The 17 articles parallel the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Article 1 declares, "Woman is born free and remains equal to man in rights." Article 10 contains her most prophetic line, "Woman has the right to mount the scaffold, so she should have the right equally to mount the rostrum." Article 11 addresses illegitimacy boldly. "Every citizeness may therefore say freely, 'I am the mother of your child.'" She appended a revolutionary marriage contract proposing communal property between spouses, equal inheritance rights for all children regardless of legitimacy, and equitable dissolution procedures. She dedicated the work to Queen Marie Antoinette, a bold and ultimately fatal strategic choice, warning her, "You must work for the revolution or risk destroying the monarchy altogether." Between 1788 and 1793, Olympe produced approximately 70 political pamphlets, making her one of the most prolific political writers of the revolutionary period. Beyond women's rights and slavery, she advocated for state-sponsored work programs for the unemployed, social services for widows and orphans, civil rights for illegitimate children, abolition of the death penalty, and marriage rights for priests and nuns. The French Revolution moved through distinct phases. 2 major factions emerged: the moderate Girondins, favouring constitutional monarchy and decentralised government, and the radical Jacobins, led by Robespierre, favouring centralised control and radical egalitarianism. Olympe, closely associated with the Girondins, she frequented the salon of Madame Roland and shared their political vision. Her most vehement conflicts were with Robespierre. She wrote public letters condemning him, took to the streets proclaiming, "Let us plunge into the Seine. Thou hast need of a bath," and published pamphlets predicting he would send many to the guillotine. Three positions particularly endangered her. First, in December 1792, she offered to defend Louis XVI at trial, arguing he should be exiled, not executed. Second, she continued defending the Girondins even after their arrest in June 1793. Third, and most fatally, she published Les Trois Urnes, calling for a national plebiscite allowing citizens to choose between three forms of government: unitary republic, federalist government, or constitutional monarchy. This was explicitly illegal under the March 29, 1793 law prohibiting advocacy for re-establishment of royalty. The Reign of Terror was formally initiated September 5, 1793. On July 20th, Olympe was arrested after attempting to post Les Trois Urnes around Paris. A bill poster refused and informed authorities. After arrest, she voluntarily led commissioners to her storehouse, where they found her unfinished play La France Sauvée, which depicted Marie Antoinette sympathetically. She spent approximately 3 months imprisoned without legal representation. She managed to smuggle out 2 final works from prison, criticizing the tribunal and maintaining her innocence. The timing of her trial is significant. Marie Antoinette was guillotined October 16th. 21 Girondin leaders were executed October 31st. Olympe was tried November 2nd, just 3 days after the mass Girondin execution. Prosecutor Antoine Quentin Fouquier-Tinville presented charges of sedition and attempting to reinstate monarchy. The judge denied her an attorney, arguing she was more than capable of representing herself based on her writings, using her literacy against her. The trial transcript notes she smirked, shrugged shoulders, and smiled at spectators, demonstrating defiance even facing death. She still believed representatives were ambitious persons. She wouldn't recant even to save herself. The jury declared her guilty. Desperate, she claimed, "I am pregnant and will bear a citizen or citoyenne for the Republic." Health officers examined her and determined the declaration false. She wrote a final letter to her son Pierre. "I die, my dear son, a victim of my idolatry for the fatherland and for the people." On November 3, 1793, Olympe de Gouges was taken to the Place de la Révolution. Looking at the crowd, she cried, "Enfants de la patrie, vous vengerez ma mort." Children of the fatherland, you will avenge my death. The crowd responded with, "Vive la République." She was 45 years old. She was executed as part of the systematic purge of Girondin sympathizers. Her criticism of Robespierre was a far greater factor in her death sentence than her support of women's rights. She became the only woman executed specifically for political writings during the Terror. 12 days later, Pierre Gaspard Chaumette used her execution as a warning. Remember the shameless Olympe de Gouges, who abandoned the cares of her household to involve herself in the Republic, and whose head fell under the avenging blade of the laws. His characterization was deliberately misleading. She had never called for women to abandon their homes. On November 8th, Madame Roland was guillotined. On November 14th, Olympe's son Pierre signed a letter denying her political legacy, attempting to change her name in records to Marie Aubry. The same year she was executed, women's political participation was formally banned by the National Assembly. An execution report emphasized Olympe de Gouges, born with an exalted imagination, mistook her delirium for an inspiration of nature. She wanted to be a man of state. The law has punished this conspirator for having forgotten the virtues that belong to her sex. For nearly 200 years, Olympe de Gouges remained forgotten. Her rehabilitation began with French historian Olivier Blanc's groundbreaking 1981 biography. The 1990s saw increased scholarly attention coinciding with the French Revolution's bicentenary. By the 21st century, she has achieved canonical status in feminist history globally. Her moral absolutism was non-negotiable. She wrote, "Blood, even that of the guilty, if shed cruelly and profusely, sullies revolutions forever." 1 month before arrest, she wrote, "I know that my death is inevitable." Olympe de Gouges was simultaneously brilliant, yet possibly partially illiterate, courageously outspoken, yet strategically manipulative. A feminist who dedicated her work to a queen, a revolutionary who opposed revolution's violence, proud yet dependent on male patronage, prescient about her martyrdom yet unable to prevent it. She died denounced as unnatural, her own son disavowing her works forgotten for nearly 2 centuries. Yet she fulfilled her own prophecy. She had the right to mount the scaffold, and history would vindicate her right to mount the rostrum. French women didn't gain voting rights until 1944, 151 years after her death. But her declaration endures as a founding text of modern feminism, and her comprehensive activism marks her as one of history's most prescient humanist thinkers. An anonymous chronicler wrote that she had thrown herself in the revolution body and soul, but having quickly perceived how atrocious the system adopted by the Jacobins was, she chose to retrace her steps. That choice, to speak truth about revolutionary violence even as the terror intensified, defines her legacy.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new documentaries.